with all this content out there and a bit of misinformation and obviously the polarity of platforms that we're experiencing at the moment, people are seeking a safe place to network and talk with like-minded individuals. So that's one of the reasons why that's happening.
Hello and welcome to the meeting room. I'm Paul Harvey. Now, pinging smartphones, Netflix cliffhangers, who's going to do the school run? The distractions of modern life can make it difficult to stay focused in meetings and events. And according to a new survey of more than 1,000 desk-based workers, the economic cost in lost productivity is staggering. Research conducted by London conference and events venue, the QEII Centre, has found that the cost to the UK economy of people drifting off during events has risen to £20.7 billion. To find out what this all means and what event planners can do to fight back against the distraction epidemic, we're joined by James Bogle, Head of Marketing and Communications at the QEII Centre, and Lea Karam, Consulting Director of Behave and a behavioural scientist. Welcome to the meeting room. This survey is absolutely fascinating. James, you're from the QEII Centre. You did the research. I was just wondering if you could tell us why you did the research in the first place.
Absolutely. It's something that we observed, I think, particularly like post-COVID, people coming back to events, was that you could really see that people are kind of being distracted kind of in meetings and events. You would see people with secondary devices, kind of on their laptops, on their phones, and quite often we'd photograph events and you'd kind of really see the evidence in the room where you'd look at a shot and you'd see 3 or 4 different people on different devices, on their laptops, on their phones, and also from talking to clients. Our clients were it was a problem that they were mentioning that they were experiencing within their events. So we thought it was a really interesting topic to kind of research and actually to find out more from the perspective of the people that are attending these events and to understand distraction in kind of greater detail.
What was the methodology behind the survey?
We conducted the research through an independent market research agency who went out to 1,050 desk-based workers. 250 of those were senior managers, C-suite level, because we really wanted to understand the difference in perspective through kind of all sort of demographics, from those who've just entered the workplace to kind of senior management, to understand, kind of were there discrepancies in kind of how people were viewing distraction, and just to get a kind of a complete picture.
What are the main causes of distraction?
Both times we've done the survey, the top 3 reasons are the same: boredom, tiredness and busy mind. And actually this year what was quite interesting was that they were all within 1% of each other. So 25% of people said boredom, 24% said tiredness, and 23% of people said busy mind. So they are clearly kind of the key factors. If year on year they're staying the same.
Is that something that tallies up with what you found as a behavioural scientist? Are those the 3 main causes of distraction?
I mean, for sure, there's a common thread there. The common thread is that there's probably too much out there. So we're having a lot of conversations at the moment about, is there too much to watch? Is there too much to read? Is there too much to listen to? Is there a lot out there? And that creates the phenomenon of safe anchoring. You really want to be in places and spaces and within an ecosystem that gets you to really engage with what you want to engage. So yes, when you talk about boredom, you talk about tiredness and all of those things, those come from other factors. You don't want to solve the symptoms, you want to solve the problem. And the problem is potentially that there's a lot out there that we don't know what to engage with anymore. And that gives us potentially a sense of being overwhelmed that we really need to solve. So whenever we speak about this, I always say that we need to solve that problem. How can we make people less overwhelmed? How can we re-engage workers? How can we re-engage our audience? And then listening and understanding your audience is the main point here, but also having interventions to be able to do that properly.
Does the level of distraction differ between online and in-person meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we found is that more people are more likely to get distracted in online meetings. So 55% of people said they were likely to be distracted online, compared to 16% this year in person. And that's actually down from 28% the previous year. I think, with online meetings, obviously, particularly with stuff like working from home, you can have the Amazon delivery driver ringing on your doorbell. You can have, the food delivery, whatever it is, coming in, and then or the postman, and suddenly you're away from your meeting. You're kind of out of there. You put your camera off, whatever else. So we do find that, particularly with kind of online meetings, there is a kind of higher element of distraction. And I think it's also partly, and again, about the, kind of the phone element, because in an in-person meeting, you can't just get your phone out or have that kind of distraction there. Whereas, if you're on a computer, you've got your phone next to you, you can always look at it, it's kind of there. So I think there's always more opportunity for distraction online, whereas in person, particularly if it's a smaller meeting, people are focusing on you as part of a kind of group. You can't be distracted because people it's more obvious, I think, whereas online it's not so kind of obvious.
Yeah, this is really interesting because we call this the availability heuristic. So whatever is available in front of you, for instance, you've got your phone, and that then ties up to the second screen phenomenon we're looking at the moment. So we talk about it with streamers, for instance, where you watch something and then you get notification on your phone. Everything's on your phone. So you end up being social and kind of answering your friends, and then you end up on TikTok because something's more relevant for you on TikTok because of the algorithmic stream. So again, that ties back to the second screen, where you end up having a lot going on within your actual phone. So availability heuristic. The second part here is that emotional engagement. It's not that, for example, Gen Z, a lot of people say that they don't really enjoy work. I always say it's not that they don't enjoy work, they don't enjoy meaningless work. They want something meaningful. So how do you create that meaningful experience? An Amazon delivery, that's meaningful. You want that emotional reward. So how can we create that emotional reward and bring it back to work? How can we bring it back to engaging people about things and topics, about learning, about education? So how can we actually bring back the emotion, or at least a sense of emotion that you get from an Amazon delivery with work or with engagement? So it's about bringing back that emotional reward and that meaningful reward. The third thing that I'd say here is that we need to unlearn a lot of things to be able to engage today, because we can't really bring things back from the past, in the sense that a lot of new workers that are entering the market need a different kind of ecosystem around them. There's a big misconception again about younger generations that when they enter the market, they're very tech savvy. No, they're social media savvy. It doesn't mean that they can actually put a conference room together. Again, those misconceptions have to be tailored and have to be really studied, and a lot of leaders have to unlearn a lot of things to re-engage not only younger workers, but the new ecosystem of working from home and engaging with dual screens and communicating with people in a way that's meaningful rather than in a way that's just typical to what they used to do.
James, that came out in the data. For younger people, maybe being tired, hungry or distracted was a large source of distraction. But older people were more likely to be affected by being bored or by the meeting being dominated by other people. That's
correct. It was really interesting. I mean, senior management are kind of a really interesting group, because we found with them that a lot of them, particularly I think it's about 80%, said that when they were chairing an event or they were speaking at an event, that they thought that estimated that people, 80% of them estimated that people were distracted whilst they were doing this, and it was obvious to them they could see that the distraction, therefore their message wasn't getting through. So I think for them there's that kind of frustration of not being able to have that engagement when they're trying to deliver something that they feel is quite important. So, but then conversely, they were the group that got distracted for the longest. So on the flip side, so they obviously, again, it's very much I think about opinions at the time, because I think 17% of senior managers lost concentration for more than like half or more of the meeting. And again, that's kind of understandable that their focus might move on to something else. But it was quite interesting that they're the ones that were observing this lack of concentration, but yet then a significant proportion probably were, also themselves finding they were prone to distraction for such a long period of time. So that was obviously quite interesting. Junior managers only came in at 10% in terms of distraction levels for over half a meeting. So it's interesting. There's definitely kind of a little bit more kind of concentration potentially within the junior management. They might get distracted, but they might not get distracted for as long. I think that's probably the message coming out of that. And I think you mentioned sort of hunger and tiredness. I think that's something that's kind of come out in both kind of the reports that we've done. So clearly there's a sort of a pattern, and I guess we need to kind of look for solutions like, around that, like why are they coming hungry? Why are they tired? How can we kind of do that? Like, obviously at a conference you can offer refreshments. So, teas, coffees, biscuits, just give them something that, at the start of the meeting that can help them kind of bring their focus back. If tiredness is to do with, kind of screen-related fatigue, well, maybe ask people to switch off their mobiles, or try and, give them a sort of a focus that moves away from things that potentially could fatigue them.
There's honestly so many interesting layers to unpack here. Again, generational indifferences are quite yeah, they're there. They're quite visible, and obviously even I see it when I speak in the room sometimes, because again, it's not about the fact that, they're senior managers and they're talking to an audience, they're a reputable person and they're talking to an audience. It's more about the audience themselves. So for instance, on a personal level, whenever I speak at an event or anything like that, I don't really tailor to a specific time for the presentation and then the Q&A. I make sure that I go quite flexibly around the audience so they feel like I actually interact with them and decide whenever I can ask a question, and I work with the organizers with that, and that works really well, and that makes your session cut through because you work off the audience. So that's the first part. There's obviously a generational difference there because people engage with things differently, but I also think that there's an audience, like a misunderstanding of audiences in general, regardless of their age, in terms of engaging different audiences and matching their energy. So the speaker, the presenter, the senior managers, anyone that sits in the room has to really read their audience. So one, audience comes first, I'll say that. Secondly, in terms of, what you spoke about, in terms of the fact that senior managers, they get potentially distracted for longer. That's also because of a phenomenon that you could call the law of the instrument. So they've got a lot of skills and specialties they might know already and are anchored in what they want to hear, which means that their selective memory is stronger. They end up really disconnecting from some information and selecting what they want to listen to. That might be linked to the skill set and the job role and the type of trait classification that they've got. With more junior manager, for instance, they want to understand, okay, what am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? What can I listen to that can then help me and support me in that? So that's why it takes potentially a bit longer for them to be distracted, and they listen for longer. That doesn't mean that they don't really get distracted in the room, because again, if the topic is not meaningful to them, then they might disconnect. But the reason why a senior manager, for instance, might get bored is because it doesn't really feed into what they already know or what they think they enjoy. So again, there is a generational difference because we live in a world where obviously it's quite hierarchical and you have a certain job, especially in certain sectors and industries, if you have that experience and if obviously you've been in that field for 20, 30, 40 years, so you decide what you want to do. And with more junior manager who just entered the job market, let's say in their early 20s, they're still exploring that, or in their late 20s even, and exploring what they want to do. But I'd say from a behavioral standpoint, it's less demographic and generational. For instance, it's more about the job that you have, the experience that you have, and basically what you want to listen to. So a generational difference in terms of, there is a alignment between what this generation wants and what this generation wants, but I think we should look at it more from an audience and behavioral perspective. Who's my audience? What's their job title? What do they want to engage with? How much experience do they have? And then take it from there.
If you're going to lead a meeting, you turn up and you assess who is in the audience in the room, rather than going, they're boomers, they're like this. Or
I mean, I always give the Ozzy Osbourne versus King Charles example, right? Same age, same gender, same mosaic group. They were both married twice, some similar interests as well, wine and dogs, but they're very different behaviorally, very different. Ozzy Osbourne is a bit more impulsive. King Charles is a bit more conscientious. Again, it comes from that structure. So otherwise you won't really resonate with any of them. You have to really understand who you're speaking to. So that is really important. And again, I always speak about Gen Z, Gen Alpha, how we can re-engage them. But even within Gen Z, you've got different profiles. Youngblood, this rock, I don't know if you know him, this indie rock artist, versus Timothée Chalamet, very conscientious, very much dressed differently. So again, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, Gen Alpha is the generation after Gen Z, so 0 to 14. They've got generational differences with millennials and Gen Xers and boomers, but it doesn't mean that they're similar within that ecosystem. So we need to look at generational differences for sure, because this technological shift did influence it, and a lot of external factors and macro factors influence that. From a micro perspective to succeed, we need to look at the psychographic and behavioral segments within those generations.
There's a lot to take in, isn't there?
Yes, so there is a lot to take in, but it's the core of it all is to understand your audience, going beyond demographics and really understanding why they need to listen to you and the meaning and the value that you can provide to them.
Do you have any tips on how meeting and event organisers can maximise engagement?
Basically by understanding the different interventions. So James, you mentioned that, you said that obviously if they're they're hungry, you can offer them some snacks. If they're bored, you can re-engage them with something interactive. You speak more and more about experiential, AR, VR, and interactive concepts all around. So really understand what they want and what's the objective from it. What do they want to get from it? And if there's something that you feel they're disconnecting from, make sure that you're quite proactive with that. So study your audience, understand them, and engage them. That's called the IKEA effect. Make them feel like they're part of something.
Okay.
Because especially now, we won't really engage with something if you don't feel like a co-creator. Within a peer economy, but broader than a peer economy, everyone's a creator now. And you never know if someone in your audience, if they post about it, you never know who it's going to reach. So you have to take every single opportunity to understand them, engage them, and bring them part of that IKEA phenomenon to grow them. So I'd say learn from your past events, make sure that you do a lot of interesting content planning by understanding your audience, where they are, what they can get from it, really use behavioral interventions to be able to get them in. And then within that event, make sure that it's experiential, make sure that it's interactive, make sure that they've got a say in things, and then make sure that they can connect with other people, be the connector, connect them with speakers, with their peers, give them interesting exercises with biscuits and tea on the side, but just don't think that they're going to engage if you don't work on understanding them and providing something that's meaningful to them.
We found that 70% of people don't want to travel more than 100 miles. So, where do you have the venue? Do you want to have the venue somewhere where most of your audience is going to be? So they're going to have that engagement, that it's not going to be a really early start in the morning. Then you've missed out doing a bunch of emails or whatever because there was no Wi-Fi on the train or something. You're not getting to the event in a panic. That you're kind of getting to the event kind of in a good headspace because you haven't had to travel kind of long distances. Then there's the event setup, because it's quite easy to get into a kind of routine of just setting your event up in the same way every time. But actually, I know you've talked about flexibility of, when you speak, you don't put a set time, but I think we found that, over a particular time, up to like 45 minutes is far too long, so, kind of maybe shorten the sessions, keep it short so people can get better engagement. Also, if we found that there's more engagement in the mornings, because people obviously are fresher. So then maybe if you've got the kind of heavier content, don't leave it. I know people put the keynote speaker on last, but I think could we actually move the keynote speaker to the beginning? Could we start the day with the real stuff that we want people to take away? I know there's risks to doing that, but how do you maximize the delegates' day? How do you get the information that you want to kind of into them? Is it do you change the way the seating is? Do you kind of look at cabaret rather than just standard tables? Do you look at a mix of seating? Do you there's all sorts of kind of ways in which you can use a conference centre. Like we at the QEII, for example, have got lots of great natural light, but therefore do you want to choose a venue that has more natural light, which then helps people kind of focus and concentrate throughout the day? So I think there's lots of things that you can look at even from a venue perspective, just in terms of the way you set up, that can then help people become more engaged and focused.
Yeah, just to add on to this, that's really interesting, because we spoke the other day at an event about the peak and rule as well. So the peak and rule means that people take away your highest peak emotional moment and the end as well. So again, if you want to engage people, you could put the keynote speaker at the start, different interesting things at the start as well. But what you should do constantly as an event planner at the end of the event is one key takeaway or one big bang at the end. So for example, if there's a main thing that you want to focus on, if there's, cocktail on the rooftop, it could be anything, but it has to be something that you want your audience to take at the end, and you put it there. So that's the peak and rule. You make sure that the ending leaves people with this really, really, really interesting takeaway that they could take. So I think that's quite important to remember as well.
So you can structure it like a gig almost.
Yeah, peak and rule, like a movie. But that's the thing. I was speaking about the fact that events is becoming one of the most important industries, because it's the only industry where you could have functional success, so let's say skills, learning, etc. Communicative success, you could really have like portray your brand, your messaging, your cues, your logos, your colors, and sensory success, because you're in an ecosystem, you touch things, you feel things, so communicative and functional and sensory at the same time only events can achieve that. And with the overwhelm of the world at the moment, everyone wants a safe space. And there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much happening within the digital ecosystem that a lot of people and a lot of workers, a lot of employees, a lot of, like people that want to attend conferences want to find comfort and safety within events. So events is a big opportunity for brands to create that. So that's why at the moment we need to jump on this opportunity and create that safety and that engagement within the event space by just getting people there, understanding them, and catering to their needs to learn. So yeah, kind of the phenomenon online led to people wanting to be offline.
I just wanted to pick up on something you said earlier about when you're speaking, not telling the organisers how long you're going to be speaking for. Presumably you don't tell the audience.
So I make sure that audience is engaged, and I think that it does work quite well because I go off them and not the other way around. So yeah, I speak to the organizers and say, okay, I know I have about 45 minutes to an hour to speak, but the thing is there's always a Q&A, and I always recommend Q&As because I want to understand their challenges. And they might, whenever I speak, especially senior managers, they might have one thing in mind that they want an answer to, one thing that keeps them up at night. So I want them to ask me that question. So I always make sure there's a Q&A, but I never say, hey, I want 30 minutes to speak and then 15 minutes for a Q&A. That's not the case. I go up the audience, look at what they want, sometimes ask them to raise their hands. So I always start my sessions by an interactive kind of exercise. So raise your hand if, you had a New Year resolution and didn't follow it. That's the optimism bias. Raise your hand if you open your phone the first thing in the morning when you didn't want to. That's availability heuristics that we spoke about. So they all raise their hands. They feel part of a movement, So I do that. And then if I feel like the audience is a very interactive audience, they really want to talk, they really want to engage, then I make sure that I don't spend too long on the data and on the statistics and on the quant side, and I then leave some time, maybe 5 more minutes for the Q&A. And again, that works quite well because people want to feel like they catered to, and they don't want to feel like it's another thing that's, okay, we're going to go from A to B. No, we're going to create meaning from A to B and maybe go to, Z at some point. So, it's like this loop that they want to be in and not this linear funnel. Nothing is really linear in our world right now.
It's got kind of like similarities with, say, stand-up comedy, where a comedian will go out.
It is sometimes.
And read the audience first and decide and be like, right, tough crowd tonight. Or kind of,
But that's really funny because when last week I was at an event, and when I got off the stage and someone was like, it was a young person actually. They were like, oh, really nice show. I was like, what? No one ever told me really nice show. But I think he works within like the West End, like that kind of in that ecosystem or in filmmaking or between both. I think he's a producer. But the fact that you have people in the audience that, I took it as a huge compliment. Like I took it as, I was able to really engage the audience because they were listening, and it was, as you say, it was like not stand-up comedy. I wish that would be funny, but no, it was more of a phenomenon where they could like listen in and engage and smile and take something that's very theoretical and analytical and data-driven into something interesting. And I would like to make the more geeky, nerdy stuff that I work on more interesting and cooler, and that's my mission. So I think it resonated quite well,
One other interesting stat from the report, James, well over half, so 56% of respondents said they expect to attend more in-person events in 2025 than they did in 2019. So even though people are more distracted in meetings and events now, people are still seeing the value in them. They're still going to attend it. We want to attend them more and more. Is that how you'd read that?
Absolutely, yeah. I think people do see the value. I think it's obviously probably part to kind of like a wider cultural shift of people kind of being back in the office more and more post-COVID and wanting to make those connections. Because one of the things that we found was I think that 73% of attendees at events last year made business deals at an event because they were there in person with the person that needed to kind of get in front of. So I think people do see the value of actually getting in front of people, doing that networking, getting to kind of beat people in the industry, kind of putting deals across the line. So, obviously and that stat really emphasises kind of the importance of that. So I think, we do expect in 2025 to see kind of a lot more people attending a lot more meetings. And I think also that is partly, again, down, if you look at the kind of the breakup of that, it's kind of, again, a lot more senior management attending more of those meetings as well.
Are people wanting to attend more in-person meetings? What's the psychology behind that?
Yes, for sure. Even outside of the event space, we talk about this. Even in marketing and in media agencies, we talk about the importance of events right now. One, it was what I mentioned earlier. I think I spoke about the fact that we, with all this content out there and a bit of misinformation and obviously the polarity of platforms that we're experiencing at the moment, people are seeking a safe place to network and talk with like-minded individuals. So that's one of the reasons why that's happening. Secondly is I'm not surprised that it's senior managers, because I mean, it's anchored in human behavior and psychology. People buy from people. It's always been like that. And when there's a lack of personal access to different people online or on, when you're talking to so many people, you want to make sure that you meet the right people and the connections. And the only way to do that, again, functional, communicative, sensory, is at events. It brings out those three factors. And thirdly, obviously, I know we say it a lot, but it's the post-pandemic phenomenon. Because there was this, we were all at home, it was quite remote, we felt a change in 2023. We felt a stronger change in 2024, because a lot of things happened within the event space where obviously some companies got acquired. There was more investment in that, but also more investment in VR, AR, in experiential content. So in 2025, we're going to feel the results of those things. So it also comes from more macro factors, and also from the fact that, people want to engage with each other and make deals, as you say, in person.
So short term, we see events kind of becoming more and more important over the next few years?
I mean, I'm seeing that big time, even with streamers. Like recently, there was like Disney Plus. They got some of their creators to present things within events, because again, like that's how you communicate with your community. That's how you communicate with your real people. So it's the real life circle, within an actual like personal space. So yeah, definitely. I also experienced that last quarter. So Q4, maybe also Q3 of last year, there are some brands who are reaching out to us about events and about winning within events and about creating those experiences and expanding that multi-touch points strategy within events. And to be honest, it's one of the first years where that happened. So yeah, I from a consulting point of view, and from a I have my clients out there that are looking for things. Events is becoming a booming field.
Fantastic. And James, presumably you're going to be conducting the research again at some point in the future. Is that the plan?
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's definitely an option for us to kind of see how things have changed. I think obviously it'd be interesting to see kind of how things go this year. I couldn't commit yet to this stage.
Yeah, hopefully we'll do, because again, using behavioral insights and embedding this within the top events companies, it's really important, because then you start somewhere and then they start developing this and engaging people based on it. I was at an expo last week and there was like real living plants, like two people like dressing up as plants to talk about, and I loved it, and everyone posted about it, and there were so many impressions. And then you've got new types of predictive AI technologies where you can actually use social listening to find something online based on the image. So if there's a certain image, then you can find where that happened. If there's a logo, you can find it. So there are tools out there at the moment to evaluate the success of a certain event beyond text and beyond anything that was obviously done in the past. So using the power of predictive AI to understand and quantify the intensity, the excitement of an event, the pain points at an event, the opportunities, is going to be really important. So we also need to leverage those predictive technologies to really understand if people are actually engaged. So yeah, I'm excited to see that measurement as well coming into play at the end of next year. So using predictive AI on conversations to understand if something was engaging or if it wasn't engaging. So a lot of opportunities to track events and measure against their success.
Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Lea and James. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you for joining me on the meeting room.